And I wanted to recognize, actually I just wanted to mention that it's been a really great series so far. We had Sarah Woodbury and Kirsten Jensen, who are the co-curators of the exhibition, Christine Potomansky, who is the curator at the Brandywine River Museum of Art, and we also had Melissa Wren, who is from Boston and works at the Harvard Business School Art and Artifacts Collection. She's the curator there and an independent art historian. And of course, today's presentation. It wouldn't have happened without the support of the New Mexico Humanities Council. And we have Lucy Silva, who is here today, there she is, who is from the council, she's a staff member there. And just thank you very much. The New Mexico Humanities Council has done so much for support for us and our project, as well as throughout the state of New Mexico, so thank you. I also wanted to recognize Sydney Folks, who joined us this last spring as our communications and events coordinator, and she coordinated the lecture series and did all the different logistics and made it run smoothly, so thank you very much to Sydney. And who just walked in, it doesn't know I'm going to recognize her, but Lindsay Mayo Fincher. She is serving as an independent evaluator who's helping us with our grant report for the New Mexico Humanities Council. So thank you very much, Lindsay, for your help. And I wanted to remind you that we do have evaluation forms on the table off to the side here, and they're really important if you can take a few moments to fill one out after the close of the lecture today. It just helps us and Lindsay and putting together a report for the Humanities Council. It just helps us to know too areas that we might be able to improve on as well. A few announcements about upcoming events that you might be interested in. This next Friday, August 24th from 6 to 9, we're hosting another party after hours. And that's the new After Hours series we've been presenting that's geared for adults, and it kind of creates a fun social environment here at the museum. This next one, the theme is going to be science, and so we're going to have Explora down, the Science Center from Albuquerque. And their staff are going to do a number of experiments that are geared for adults this time. They usually work with kids. And we'll have a DJ and a science trivia game, prizes, Toddzilla is going to be catering, and it's going to be a lot of fun, so hopefully you can make it out for that. I'll also mention too, Miranda Howe is going to be there, so some of you know her. She has a new Bone Springs Art Center, and she'll be demonstrating egg tempera and sort of the science side of the art. And egg tempera, as you know, is Peter Hurd's primary medium that we have on display for the show. Also coming up, we have on September 5th, the curator of the Ammon Carter Museum contacted us recently, and he wanted to come out to see the Herd and Wyeth exhibition. So he's also going to give a talk that day. It's Wednesday from noon to 1 p.m. And it's part of our Brown Bag Talk series. And he'll be talking on the Eve of St. John, which is one of Peter Hurd's paintings, and so sort of the background and how that piece came together. So it should be very enlightening. Again, sort of a surprise lecture for us, but we're really happy to have him on board. And again, that'll be September 5th, a Wednesday from 12 to 1. And there's a small flyer over there for more information. Something that's coming up a little bit in the future is on Saturday, October 13th. We're going to be hosting our first Science and Art Festival, and we're actually going to be having it at the Convention Center. Supposedly it will be done, so we hope, fingers crossed. We have funding coming from the Science Festival Alliance as well as Excel Energy. And it's going to be a really great festival. It's really geared for all ages. We'll have hands-on activities for kids. We'll also have brief talks, 10-minute talks on innovative science and art topics. We'll have hopefully a virtual reality room. So talking about the latest virtual reality technology that's available. There's going to be a student gallery. Kate the chemist, her name's Kate Biebendorf. She's the professor of chemistry at the University of Texas, Austin. And she is going to be doing a stage presentation. She's also been seen on CNN, the Discovery Channel, the Stephen Colbert Show. So she does really fun presentations. Usually involves a little bit of fire, so I am working with the fire marshal on that. But it should be a lot of fun, again, for all ages. So again, on Saturday, October 13th, and it goes from 10 until 4, so please come to that. What else do we have going on? I think that's all the kind of upcoming events. So today's presentation, oh, actually one more person I want to recognize is Fred over here, by the way. He's doing our sound today. And so today's presentation is a little bit different. So not only is it a lecture, it's also a concert. And so just a little bit of background on Leo. Dr. Leo Mazow, he is the, Louise B. and J. Harwood Cochran, curator of American art from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. And he also contributed an essay to the Magical and Real catalog called Hydroculturally Yours. So that's the topic of today's lecture. In 2013, he received the Eldridge Prize for scholarship in American art from the Smithsonian Museum of American Art, and that was for his book Thomas Hart Benton and the American Sound. He's also working on an exhibition called Edward Hopper and the American Hotel that will be opening in 2019 at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. But then the other side of his life, he's also a musician. And so he's incorporating that music into today's presentation. And so joining him is Brittany Stevenson, and he and Brittany have they're friends. They've been performing together since 2013 under the title The Coverlets. And Sydney and I heard them practice yesterday. They are amazing. So I'm really happy that you all are here to enjoy it. And help me welcome Leo Mazzow.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that was a very generous introduction. Carolyn, thank you very much. Before getting going, I want to say, first of all, just what a treat it is to be here. I've been to Santa Fe, I've been to Albuquerque. I don't think I'd ever been to Roswell. I think Roswell's an awesome place. I think it's charming as the day is long, and I think there's a lot of cultural things happening in this. I mean, there's the Anderson, and there are other things going on here, certainly. But this place, this refurbished former WPA Federal Arts Center, this is just a heck of a coup to have this, and I just think you're all to be congratulated for supporting this, and I feel really, really honored to play a very minor role, just, giving a talk here. This is definitely one of the coolest venues I've ever presented at. And I want to say that I'm very grateful. I would like to repeat Caroline, in addition to thank Caroline, I join her in thanking Sydney. Fred on sound deserves a gold medal for helping us with all this, so thank you very much. And of course to the New Mexico Humanities Council for paying the bill, for making all this happen, and supporting this kind of work in Roswell and across this ginormous state. So just to get right into it, is there a clicker for me to advance?
I will find out.
Okay, let's see, there we go. Okay, so have you all seen the exhibition?
Oh, yeah.
How cool is Peter Hurt? I mean, it's crazy. He's just good at what he does. Early on in his life, as you probably know, he marries N.C. Wyeth, this famous American illustrator's oldest daughter, and was basically the brother-in-law of Andrew Wyeth. And you have Henriette's work out there, which at places is about as surreal as it gets. In other places, both she and Peter are more in the style of Thomas Hart Benton-esque regionalism and things like that. And I love both of their works, and I've seen this show. I saw it when it was at before at the Michener Art Museum in Doylestown, just north of Philly. And I'm just pretty blown away with this. And one of the things that blows me away most are windmills. And I really didn't even quite understand what this ubiquitous emblem in the landscape, the windmill, did until really just immersing myself into this. But, the food in your tummy, and I mean, windmills have everything to do with diet, with checkbook, and windmill imagery recurs in the art of Peter Hurt, facilitating his endeavor to engage the geographical and agricultural history of his native New Mexico. It was often the windmill as a thing. It was often a compositional device, like a way to unite the foreground, the middle ground, and the background, to suggest a bird's eye view, to work out tonal variation, to stabilize figure-ground relationships. More than this, though, it offered an arena for addressing issues public and sometimes very private. The windmill is found throughout his paintings and illustrated books. 18 of his lithographs feature windmills, and a large windmill anchored the right side of his mural at the New Mexico Military Institute here. They populate not only Heard's painted landscapes, but also, on occasion, the backgrounds of portraits, such as Boys from the Plain. When he was approached by Steuben Glass to submit a drawing to be etched in glass for the 1940 exhibition, the collection of designs on glass by 27 contemporary artists, which also featured Picasso, Thomas Hart Benton, Ferdinand Leger, Grant Wood. Well, Peter Heard positioned a windmill tiny, but in the right background to establish depth and credible space making, and thematically a sign of modern farming in the Southwest. He occasionally kept a windmill, a model of a windmill top in his studio, and some of his earliest memories concerned windmills on the plains of eastern New Mexico. The images engage a time-honored foray into the landscape genre, but one of the things I'd like to make clear today is they also facilitate his act of looking, the artist's gaze. To the extent that these images are about anything, they also are about, as weird as it may sound to say this, the act of looking in itself. It would be difficult to overstate the visual and even sonic presence of windmills in his upbringing. The first sentence in his 1953 autobiographical essay said, "Among the things I remember in New Mexico was the sound of the old Eclipse windmill on my father's farm. Upon buying his ranch in San Patricio in 1934, which he would call Sentinel Ranch, he set up a windmill as one of the first orders of business. It was needed for, among other things, plumbing. The construction of that windmill is depicted in the painting The New Mill, and he hoped to use the sales of the lithograph print version of it to pay for this windmill itself." Heard's lithograph of the New Mill depicts Roswell native Sam Butler and two others working on the Sentinel Ranch windmill. With the structure positioned on its side and with its rudder foreshortened in lower left, the print shows one of the workers atop the mechanism, presumably tightening a bolt with a socketed brace. The view of the distant mountains that the mill's platform will ultimately provide is evident through the screen of crossbeams, ladder, and the barbed wire. After a false start at West Point and considerable time in Chad's Ford with his wife Henriette Wyeth's family, including his father, her father, N.C., with whom he studies and whom he absolutely worshiped in several of whose works we have here right now, Heard felt, around 1934, stronger than ever an imperative, he said, to paint New Mexico and to spend the better part of each year here. In letter after letter to friends and family, Heard expressed excitement for the state's climate and natural history, reserving special praise for the solitude of places like Roswell and San Patricio. It was a place just waiting to be interpreted by a landscape painter. Even the storms, Heard wrote, carry, quote, the awful majesty of avenging angels in a Renaissance painting. The only thing that competed with his affection for the New Mexico landscape was his love for Henriette. In one letter, he suggested that even that was a close call. He wrote to his wife, "I wish there wasn't this terrible conflict inside of me of love for this land and love for you." From his windmill and tank of 1930 to the Gate and Beyond of 1952, this device figured prominently in his love affair with New Mexico and the Southwest. Windmills provided for Heard an icon with and from which to see, understand, and interpret the land and natural history to which it responds. When the artist called his recumbent windmill at the San Patricio Ranch the sleeping giant, he hinted at the far-reaching monumentality of the structure and its role in his evolving love of the landscape. The water pump pumping and distribution that windmills facilitate were a means with which to keep the love alive, so to speak, to bring critical sustenance to plant, animal, and human life alike, to promote and protect nature and culture. By the mid-1940s, diverse audiences around the country recognized in Hurd's painting an ongoing visual conversation regarding the scarcity and life-grading potential of water and the means necessary to find, distribute, and conserve it. This is certainly the case with an article appearing in Life magazine in 1947 entitled Water in the Southwest. The 5-page photo essay was subtitled, quote, "By saving every drop, ranchers are turning their deserts into green farmland." And it reproduced 5 paintings, including this. It reproduced 5 paintings to make its point. Accompanying each of the reproductions is text, identifying the paintings as illustrations of irrigation and as prompts for discussion of land and water rights in New Mexico. Text and image in the Life photo essay conflated all soil and water concerns under the word water. At stake in much of modern New Mexican history, and in Hurd's painting in particular, though, is the water below the ground. Subterranean and various spring waters, the relation to land tenure, carried an altogether different historical pedigree and set of rights than surface water usage. Also unmentioned in the Life article was a topic of which Hurd and the magazine's editors were very aware. Federally imposed measures for equity in New Mexico, wet water allocation, and water rights in general typically favored moneyed white inhabitants and ultimately disregarded or exploited Hispanic and American Indian landowners. Taking the role of artist, activist, educator, and sort of scientist, Hurd provided a diagram appearing as a sort of frontispiece illustrating the process by which cold air from the Pacific rides over hot deserts and ultimately pushes moisture into clouds, resulting in rain. At far right, Hurd painted a windmill whose modest scale belies its role as an intervention in the complex natural cycle. In a subsequent issue of Life, numerous letters to the editor, each apparently referring to the oasis, remarked that the artist didn't really understand water pressure, the differences between wooden and steel windmills, and especially the unlikelihood of the windmill producing so much water on a hot day with no breeze. The editors reserved the last word for Hurd, though. He chimed in from San Patricio, pointing out that anyone, quote, from this part of the country would realize the breeze had died abruptly and the windmill has stopped, end quote, and that this would in no way alter the flow of water from the, quote, 30 inches of vertical pipe, end quote. He was a bit of a smart aleck, and so he signed it, speaking on behalf of windmills and the life in New Mexico that they made possible. The artist signed his letter, "Hydroculturally yours, Peter Hurd." Way to stick it to the man, right? Roswell and much of New Mexico experienced annual shortages of rainfall, as if I need to tell you this, making water even more of a precious commodity here than it is in many other places. In the Southwest, the water table, as you know, is usually too far beneath the ground to accommodate very many wells without the aid of windmill-powered pumps. Beginning in the 1880s, windmill production usually followed the path of the railroads. Steam locomotives obviously needed water. Making open grazing a thing of the past, barbed wire facilitated the development of windmills in the Southwest in the 1870s and 1880s. Improvements in well drilling also contributed to its spread in New Mexico. Wells made it possible to reach water, and the windmill was necessary to bring the water to the surface. It literally pumps it up. Roswell, as we know, is here in the southwest of New Mexico, and our natural resources, water, were drastically transformed by windmill use in the period 1875 to 1930. Attesting to their popularity, which only escalated in the early 20th century, windmills were readily available via mail order. American windmill production would only begin to slow down around 1935 with the New Deal's Rural Electrification Act. This is a poster for that. By the late 19th century, steel towers were replacing the wooden models, And several of the wooden windmills in Hurd's paintings and prints harken to an earlier time than when he painted them. In spite of the modernizing trend, in their homemade windmills, farmers and ranchers indeed were likely to use wood well into the mid-20th century. Still, one such wooden structure, seen in Windmill and Tank, shows the pipe from the mill to the elevated tank, generating water pressure for home and farm. Hurd uses multiple rich hues of green to suggest dense foliage, like a sign that the windmill in the painting is successfully pumping and distributing the subterranean waters. Where one finds a windmill, one will usually find a tank, and the water-filled chamber appears in most of Hurd's windmill scenes. I love this painting. Depicting two boys swimming in a tank, his painting, The Oasis, suggests that the apparatuses not only rejuvenated nature, but figured in recreation and leisure as well. Or, as the Life article in 1947 put the matter alongside their full spread reproduction of this painting, it could be, quote, used by cattle as a drinking trough and by ranch boys as a swimming hole. Not sure you want to take that one. The windmill he knew best, though, was the steel structure he had installed at Sentinel Ranch, which appears, although with some artistic license, in several of his works, but perhaps most notably in this painting, The New Mill, which is on display in this exhibition. The image depicts three men steadying Hurd's newly built four-legged windmill. The vertical picture format heightens the structure's reach, and the cables holding it down lead our eyes to its top. The barbed wire in the foreground and the automobile in right join the steel structure in identifying Sentinel Ranch as a modern ranch in the modern West. The windmill looks like several early and mid-20th century mills in New Mexico and the Southwest. The slim tower, blades, and diagonal bracing on the rudder look a whole lot like the popular pumping air motor manufactured by the Chicago-based Air Motor Company. At the top of the windmill, below the gearwork to the right of the tilted rudder, a man sits on the enclosing platform, a wooden base typically used for adding grease or making wood repairs. The cross-breaking and lattice work make windmills especially easy to climb, as is evident in the lithograph Day's Work, which likely shows two of the so-called windmillers, whose only job was to ride from windmill to windmill, oiling them and making any necessary repairs. We also see this in the aptly named Windmill Crew, a view of the windmill top in which two men work on repairs. The can on the platform at lower right, beside the standing man's left leg, would likely contain oil, some kind of grease. Illinois was home to several windmill manufacturer companies, and the rudder and Windmill Crew identifies the machine as a Samson mill, built in Moline Mill, Illinois. Immensely popular in the U.S. and overseas, Samson products, including the self-oiling mill, however, were made by Stover Manufacturing and Engine Company, not in Moline, but Freeport, another city in Illinois. As if flaunting his knowledge of windmills, Hurd appears to have conflated two companies in Illinois, Moline and Samson. The close-up of the blades, gear, and motor in this lithograph emphasize the sheer size of the mill, if not the monumentality of the task of harnessing wind energy into water via drilling and pumping. Naming the firm after the biblical strongman Samson suggests that windmill companies promoted themselves with the promise of some sort of celestial power. Seen from a distance and modeled in a reductionist manner that Hurd's friend Paul Horgan called oddly personal and angular, the man at top and right in the platform and Windmill Crew does not look up at the motor, but rather appears to scan the prairie before him. Similarly, Hurd had experienced climbing windmills for reasons other than maintenance. As a child, he frequently climbed windmills, which he called his first airborne experience. In that 1953 autobiography, he emphasized that his gaze from the windmill's platform yielded a sense of visual awe. So it seemed to us, as we gazed from our windmill tower, that our farm lay at the exact center of a fabulous and exciting world of plains, extending in directions to form a complete rim with the sky, only to be lost in the infinity of mirage. I have felt that more or less without climbing windmills, but I would not have phrased it so poetically. Hurd worked from elevated views in such paintings as Haunted Landscape, Dry River, and Shower in a Dry Year. In his comments for John Meigs's catalog Raisonnaithus lithograph, the artist commented that he transformed the earthbound view of the Little Ranch into the aerial view of the tank, which appeared in Horgan's 1936 volume, Return of the Weed, so that he might, quote, attain a more dramatic effect, stressing the vastness of the plains and the isolated loneliness of the ranch, end quote. It's not always obvious whether Hurd took or was inspired by the views from a windmill or rising mountainside, but it is clear that, beginning at a young age, he understood the vision expanding potential of an elevated gaze, and that this would later assist in his endeavor to sustain the illusion of an airborne vantage point in several paintings. The word panorama derives from Greek roots meaning view all. Like famous 19th century and European panoramic landscape paintings, Rants on the Plains enlists a horizontal format to give you a wide view. The high horizon line and the dramatic contrast of light and shadow give this painting a sense of expanded vision and stress the immensity of the natural formations. This is the same vastness of the plains that facilitated the dramatic effect of the tank in related lithographs. So deep and vast is the vista in Rants on the Plains that here, surveying the flat plains near Roswell, you can see all the way to El Capitan Mountain in the background. Rants on the Plain depicts a windmill, but it also depicts a view one might have from an even higher vantage point, one that might be had from the elevation of a bird. Hurd was likely inspired by his brother-in-law, Andrew Wyeth's painting, Soaring, which features a bird of similar proportions, and even more than Hurd's painting, renders miniature the landscape and architecture below. Hurd's elevated views from the windmill, and perhaps in Rants on the Plains from the bird, find full realization in a suite of paintings based on drawings and memories from his service in World War II as a war correspondent, artist for the Army Air Corps. Hurd had become friends with Life magazine editor Daniel Longwell when the magazine ran a photo essay on the artist in the mid-1930s. And it was Longwell who got for Hurd the rank of captain with, quote, all an officer's prerogatives. The artist would spend most of the summer and fall of 1942 in England, with extended stays in Bristol and London, in Airdrome and Mayfair, where he witnessed bombed-out buildings, gruesome human remains, and other gaping scars left in the wake of war. He was inspired by the landscape, which reminded him of paintings by John Constable. In this capacity, he produced several portraits and landscape paintings depicting views from aircraft, such as View from the Navigator's Window of a Flying Fortress, and You Are the Waist Gunner, English landscape from a flying fortress. He took great pleasure in describing the flight that resulted in the latter, which he told Henriette was, quote, the greatest experience I've had here so far. In England, Hurd often flew over the fields of haymakers and View from the Navigator's Window of a Flying Fortress, indeed pictures at an oblique angle, parceled acreage, partly obscured by clouds, and in the middle distance, another plane, a B-17 Bombardier. As the art historian Jason Weems has shown, in the decades leading up to the artist's trip to England, a wide range of sources, from maps, atlases, government-sponsored survey photography, to Walt Disney's animated short, Plane Crazy, and Frank Lloyd Wright's Broadacre City, had exploited the expressive possibilities of the airborne or aerial gaze. With the map cropped in the foreground and a low-lying cloud, View from the Navigator's Window disrupts the fixity of frontal, stationary linear perspective in a manner similar to these cultural productions. Like the view of New Mexico offered from a window platform, the English countryside in Hurd's paintings is summarized, made intelligible by way of an elevated gaze that risks presenting the artist or beholder with maybe too much visual data. The war and windmill pictures challenge the traditional horizontal emphasis of landscape engagement. Herd's views reckon with new altitudes and vectors. They produce a somewhat generalized world of simultaneous continuity, downward vertical gazes, and oblique diagonals. This is even the case with the ground view painting by Herd, Enemy Action over Bomber Station. Time and again, Herd opens our visual perspective with vistas we probably wouldn't have if we saw it from the ground. So, surveying the panoramic reach of the landscape from the vantage point of a windmill might have brought forth a different set of associations in New Mexico, and maybe the Southwest in general, than it would from other locales. Herd was uncommonly well-versed in matters of ecological sustainability. In San Patricio, he periodically served on a government committee overseeing water and soil conservation. As he expected the plains and mountains from aloft, the artist would have looked down upon a region experiencing, for his entire boyhood and adolescence, massive water shortages. He surely knew that the Roswell Artesian Basin was a precious and vulnerable resource. Legal rights, and particularly the so-called appropriation doctrine, which was essentially homesteading for subterranean water rights, existed, but not until 1952 would a law declare public all groundwater in the state. Herd probably also knew that thousands of ranches in early 20th century New Mexico failed precisely because of inadequate water supply. The foregrounding and elevating of the windmill sets apart Herd's enterprise from that of other American scene painters. In John Stuart Curry's painting, The Old Folks, the large windmill is visible through the window, but it's relegated to the background and it doesn't define the landscape as it does in Herd's work. In several murals, painting, and lithographs, Thomas Hart Benton demonstrated his understanding of the triangulation of windmill, tank, and cattle and farm animals. Windmill and tank imagery also populates many of his famous railroad compositions. But however integral the windmill is in a work like cattle loading in West Texas, it neither dominates the composition nor articulates the landscape vastness. Benton did do a few of what we might call Herdish, Herd-like windmill scenes late in his career, but this is the only one I know of. Perhaps most obviously, paintings and prints by Benton, Curry, and Greenwood, but also so-called Texas regionalists, like this guy, grant the emblem the linear fixity of a worm's eye view, whereas Herd, on the other hand, frequently presents the windmill as a device from which to see and interpret the landscape and to emphasize the visual power of our airborne gaze. Even in Herd's views from the ground, the windmill joins the mountains in articulating vertical rise in compositions otherwise marked by horizon elongating elements. Illustration played an important role throughout Herd's career and had its roots in his childhood and adolescence. For reasons not entirely clear, his high school English teacher at New Mexico Military Institute allowed him and his close friend and classmate, Paul Horgan, to, instead of the usual reading and composition, to write and illustrate weekly installments in their own novel. They wrote 2 such series. Horgan recalled that Herd's drawings resembled those of Harrison Fisher and other popular illustrators of the day. Even in his early in his artistic career in the mid-1920s, he took on those commissions that N.C. Wyeth was too busy to accept at this point in Herd's life. That work constituted most of his income. He would entertain commercial assignments on commission, including work for Whitman Chocolates in 1929 and 1930, at which time he also began illustrating for Scribner's and Little Brown publishing houses. Herd largely limited his work to fiction and frequently illustrated juvenile literature. But this was by far his most prolific time as an illustrator. The WorldCat lists 15 Herd illustrated volumes from this period. By the late 1930s and 40s, he was increasingly providing drawings for scholarly American and Southwest history texts and travel narratives. Not surprisingly, windmill imagery is found throughout this literature, including on the frontispiece for Mary Mapes Dodge's Hans Brinker, or The Silver Skates, one of the volumes of which he collaborated with N.C. Wyeth. Paul Horgan once remarked that his narratives respond to Heard's images as much as the artist simply punctuated the text with corresponding drawings. This may well have been the case with Horgan's 1936 book, The Return of the Weed. Heard produced 8 lithographs that appeared in turn as the frontispiece, the title page, in other words, and the chapter headers in this collection of. The book's really full of very sad, kind of very dramatic short stories. A version of the book released simultaneously in England took the title Lingering Walls, which Horgan took to mean ruins. The frontispiece, a mechanical reproduction of a lithograph, The Return of the Weed, portrays at left the threadbare remains of a tank and a windmill with a sagging vane and bare braces where the blades were once attached. That the book concerns ruins is yet confirmed by the lithograph Domitian, fronting a story of the same title, in which Heard silhouetted the still smoldering structure in decay against the white of the lithographic stone. Selected fellow artists had similarly explored the expressive possibilities of windmills as ruins. In 1947, in his photograph Windmill Animas, New Mexico, Elliott Porter depicted the broken down structure in a forebodingly lifeless landscape. Perhaps most notably, though, in his painting Drought-Stricken Area, Texas realist Alexander Hogue positioned a composition-dominating, dilapidated windmill with a starving cow with exposed ribs at left and a menacing vulture at right to show the full wrath of the Dust Bowl. Heard's illustration of the tank from The Return of the Weed suggests a landscape and agricultural context similarly impacted by the arid condition, but its elevated view allows the viewer or reader to see just how obsolete, how useless the mill, tank, and house are in the face of the nation-debilitating Dust Bowl. The tank is a bird's eye view of a mill and an earthen tank adjacent to a modest house and a road stretching to the horizon. The story narrates the saga of Winfield Martin, who opts to run a Loomis, New Mexico ranch he's inherited from his father rather than wait for a better job to become available in El Paso. His new bride, the materialistic and socially conscious Willa May, grew ashamed and embarrassed. Upon leaving the ranch with their newborn daughter, her sight of the, quote, sky-colored metal shafts of the windmill and its motionless blades, unquote, confirmed her sense of the desolate nature of the arid, unfit for living site, which Heard shows here. When they get divorced, Horgan describes the windmill and the tank as signs of promise unfulfilled. With the crisply delineated tank and windmill towering over this small house, the image suggests that domestic bliss will never be guaranteed by agricultural apparatuses. Extending to the horizon, the road may only be sketchily depicted, but in the story, it's his ex-wife Willa May's escape from a landscape and a marriage that just can't be saved by a windmill. In 1948, sorry for this picture, it's the best scan I could get, Heard provided 14 drawings for a reprint of journalist, classicist, theologian Ross Calvin's immensely popular Sky Determines, an interpretation of the Southwest, a celebration of all things New Mexico, which was first published in 1934. A frontal view of a windmill and water tank accompanies the book's 12th chapter, Wells and Trails, where it illuminates the author's prolonged discussion of the harnessing of the underground water supply, with special attention paid to the importance of water for agriculture and railroads. Heard's drawing repeats, to a point, the windmill and tank imagery in the Oasis 3 years earlier, moving the tank to the right and replacing the painting's human denizen with cows. And I'm aware that every time I slightly move, it makes a bang, and I'm really sorry for that. Capable of denoting both modernity and archaic futility, the windmill is an elastic emblem in the art of Peter Hurd, symbolizing agribusiness and landscape conditions, but also pointing to an expanded, vista-opening mode of vision. Beginning early in childhood and extending throughout his life, it was this larger-than-life monumental structure, the windmill, that he saw in New Mexico, in San Patricio, and Roswell. But it was also the structure from which he saw this very landscape, like the dude up there with his hand on the structure. It was the filter through which he encountered and interpreted New Mexico, a frame of reference informing even his interpretations of landscapes and paintings and prints, not taking windmills as their subject. As both a theme and a pictorial device, the windmill sustained Hurd's art in much the same way that the implement itself pumps water to Norse flora and fauna. It offered a way to understand the vastness of New Mexico and to push the limits of human vision. I'm nearing my time limit, obviously. I'm definitely nearing my time limit. But I want to say that there are a number of other issues to which future scholarship on Peter Hurd might be attentive. One of those is the extent to which Hurd's artistic production parallels trends in popular culture and mythologies about New Mexico and the West in general. His many views of the state's highways match the growing cult for the Great American Road, a place where automobiles enact their own mythology. We kind of get this vibe in works like Truck Stop, which not only contains a Phillips 66 gas station, but most likely is Route 66, a new, sometimes tongue-in-cheek frontier addressed perhaps notably in the song Get Your Kicks on Route 66, performed by Nat King Cole and many others. So I got the low horizon line here, and you find it in so many other works too. Even when the horizon line is high, you still get the feeling of a very big sky. The elongated panoramic format sometimes yields a sensation too. Now, in terms of state logos, Montana may be big sky country, but it has its share of associations with New Mexico as well, which was made all the more evident in the 2015 drama thriller, Big Sky, filmed in Albuquerque and featuring several native New Mexican actors. Kate Bush's The Big Sky, a song obviously having absolutely nothing to do with the American Southwest, nonetheless uses the Big Sky trope as an occasion to make an equation between clouds, the water they might yield, and the release, the catharsis that offers. Note her fantasy of a cloud looking like Noah's Ark, a way to make it through the anticipated flood. Therefore, a related field for inquiry is Hurd's contribution to visual, literary, film, and musical culture valorizing the West and New Mexico and their topographical and weather formations. This is not to say that any particular musician, for example, has looked to Hurd for subject matter, but rather what I'm saying is that this artist in particular contributed to ongoing nascent ideas about New Mexico, water, and even mining. His paintings join other cultural productions like Billy the Kid's role in Lincoln County Wars and the songs and movies about that in promoting this popular culture. Consider the Little Feat song, Willie, famously covered by Linda Ronstadt. Route 66 intersects with US Route 54 in Tucumcari, and the song recounts the drug-enhanced efforts of exploited truckers to make it from Tucson to this eastern New Mexico town. Whatever else Hurd's paintings address, they are certainly about traversing New Mexico's elongated spaces in trains, trucks, and other conveyances. That's wrong. This painting is actually part of the collection of the Roswell Museum and Arts Center. Issues of weather and atmospheric effect recur and have profound meaning in Hurd's windmill-laden landscapes. The literary historian Eduardo Cadava has suggested that, quote, weather is a kind of text, a system of signs to be read. Duh. Maybe that's obvious, right? As in a painting of a season. But in a work like Dry River and the escape of Billy the Kid, the artist wants to show us the rain. Like, how do you paint rain? How do you show it falling and still actually see the rain? As opposed to just warning of it with gray clouds, or boasting of its effects with a verdant landscape. To see the rain from far away is a simple but still visually rewarding spectacle. No wonder the modern rock group in the 60s, Creedence Clearwater Revival, could intone over and over, "Have you ever seen the rain?" So, I'd like to play a few songs that show American popular music intersecting with the very same culture of New Mexico, getting across Route 66 from Chicago to Los Angeles. There's this giant square of space, not exactly square, called New Mexico. I'd like to sing a song, play a song about the enormous sky here. But most of all, I need help in doing this, but I'd like to ask my partner in crime, my bandmate, Brittany Stevenson, to come up and help me do this.
Good afternoon. Hello. I'm Brittany.
Hi, Brittany.
Hi, Leo. That was a very nice lecture. I did hear it once before in Pennsylvania at the Mitchell, and, you know, it never gets old. I grew up in Lubbock, so I spent a lot of time, you know, summer camps in New Mexico and things like that, and we would always drive through Roswell. And I was super excited to be back here now. I live in Dallas. We met in Arkansas about 5 years ago. And my mother got to come visit because we're so close to home. So here we go. I guess after you get tuned up. Minnesota for a few years, but I kind of did just get a new take on that. Because I do remember growing up in Lubbock, and you can see the rain, and it is sunny outside, and you know that it's coming, and it's taking days to get there, or the tornado, or the windstorm, or whatever it is. And normally I sing the song like, oh, it's depressing, but I don't think it has to be depressing.
Place is the key.
Yeah. Context. Sorry.
This is our way of getting to Route 66.
The buzzer tried to throw the monkey off his back. misty-eyed. And I had to practice a lot this morning so that I could cry it all out before I get misty-eyed. You get misty-eyed too? You're sweet.
I know.
Think about being on the road and your loved ones
I
are away.
know, I know.
And I love Dallas.
Don't do drugs.
Don't do drugs. Just say no.
All right.
Do you want to introduce this next song or no?
This song's about floods and mining rights and water rights in a generic place called the West. It's called Rocks in the Box. It's by a group called the Decemberists. That's not part of the song. That's not either.
We endure our fellow man. We sing his songs to the head.
like, if I get to 10, not really, they would just make us go for it. Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. Who cares about the clouds when we're together? Just sing a song and bring the sunny weather. Happy trails to you until we meet again. Some trails are happy ones, others are blue. It's the way you find the trail that counts. Here's a happy one by you. Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. Who cares about the clouds when we're together? Just sing a song and bring the sunny weather. Happy trails to you until we meet again. Leo always does our one for us before anybody has the chance. But that was technically it, but we always like to throw in pull some principles, so we'll just do that too. Encore! Woo! Thank you! Can I get an encore?
I know where the commercial began, I can't repeat what it's saying, but this has a little to do with some vague generic type of the West, I guess.
Well, like trains,
Planes.
planes, and I hear the train coming, it's rolling round the bend, and I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when, and I'm stuck in Folsom Prison. Time keeps dragging on. again. Thanks for having us.
If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them either right now or in person, whatever you want. So,
Happy Saturday.
happy Saturday. Thanks for coming out.
Thanks to Leo, thanks to Brittany.
Can we all say thanks to COVID